Okay, this session I'm working on SimpleArchiver, which is written in C, so I'll be using nvim this time. The idea is, well, recently I added white blacklist to sway bar info for filtering net devices when using all. In SimpleArchiver, there's a similar white blacklist functionality, and it doesn't have whitelist exact or blacklist exact. So this session I'm adding the exact functionality, and in doing so I end up restructuring the whitelist blacklist code. You will be seeing a lot of raw pointer handling in this since it's basically plain C. So now I'm adding the help text info for the exact command or parameter argument. Need to do some initialization here, otherwise it would be a random value for the pointer, which is not ideal at all. And this part is implementation of the actual argument parsing for the exact white blacklists. I forget a parentheses here, closing parentheses, which causes LSP to not work properly, and I get stuck on that for a little while. Um, why I'm using a hash map instead of a hash set? I made my own data structures for SimpleArchiver, and instead of being redundant and making a hash set, which is, well, the implementation is already there in a hash map. The difference is I'll just use the key and not really use the value. In other words, I don't feel like implementing a hash set when I already have a hash map. So I can still use a hash map like a hash set. Here I'm a little bit confused why LSP isn't resolving. And that's because of that parentheses I didn't close earlier in this part of the code. So there's a little bit of back and forth going on right here. Checking health of Vim to ensure that LSP is working. Or NeoVim, that is. Should have paid more attention to the warning error notification, but I guess I didn't notice it this session. The way HashMap is designed is that if you pass null to the cleanup and the key and value cleanup functions, it's going to assume that it has to use the free function to clean up the data. I finally closed the parentheses here, which fixes everything for me with the LSP. I don't have Clang format configured for this project. I keep forgetting that, but basically I do it manually. If I had switched to Clang format now, it would have made a lot of unnecessary changes to... It would have been a commit with a lot of line changes, and it would mess up the history of if you use git blame, for example. So instead of changing to a formatter, I'm just doing it manually for now. Like I said, I don't want to mess up the git history with unnecessary formatting changes in between the changes I want to track, if I do want to track them. So the way the hash map in SimpleArchiver is designed is that if you use get on it, it returns the value that it's found. Right now I had a duplicate strings passed into key and value, but it's kind of wasteful to do it that way. So instead I check get to ensure that it does what I expect, which returns the value associated with the key. So instead of passing another duplicate of string, which has to be freed eventually, I instead pass 1 cast it to a void pointer, and the cleanup function for that value is set to a dummy function because it's not, the pointer is just value 1. It's not really a allocated thing on the heap or anything like that. So I cast 1 the void pointer so that when I do get and it matches the string, it will return that 1. Since 1 is not a null pointer, it will resolve as true when it's checked in a if statement. If I had left it null, it would have been false no matter what value I passed to get. And here's the cleanup part of the hash maps that were defined for the whitelist, blacklist exact. Now I pinpoint the function that is used when checking whitelists and blacklists. Thankfully, everything for whitelist, blacklist is contained in this single function. And this is where the magic happens, so to speak. Here I'm adding the implementation of checking against the whitelist exact hash map. Unfortunately, I accidentally forget to implement the checking against the blacklist exact hash map, which I fix in a later commit to this repository. Since the exact hash maps have 1 for the value, like I said before, get on a valid key will return a non-null pointer. So that if statement would resolve true as long as the value exists in the hash map. The key, that is. And here I realized I used whitelists and blacklists at the same time without checking if whitelist exists. So I'm trying to make it the same behavior as in swaybar info, what I've done there, which is whitelist when there exists at least 1 whitelist. Otherwise, use blacklists. Now that I've restructured it, I need to make sure it works properly by doing some more handling of the behavior of whitelists and blacklists. Unfortunately, I get it wrong by the end of the session, which is why there are more commits that I pushed after the end of this session that fixes this. For some reason, I wanted to see where this function is being used, but it's not really that important because I already know that this function does all the handling for whitelists and blacklists. This I changed later. Not this session, but later. So it's set up if it goes through all the whitelists and it's not allowed by any whitelist to return 0 to say that it's not allowed. And for the blacklists, it goes through all of them. And if it doesn't match any blacklist, then it returns 1, which is allowed. checking if the unit tests check the white blacklist, but turns out the unit tests don't test it. I probably should add that. It would have made my life easier, but for now I did it manually. Now for some manual testing. Sometimes when using remove, it's better to put the -r-f after the path because you might accidentally delete things you don't want to if you hit enter early. didn't test blacklist exact thoroughly because right now it's not implemented, but I do fix it in a later commit. The commit for the main features now. Version 3.2. Like I said before, I add 2 more versions after this to fix the white blacklists issues that I haven't fixed in this session. At this point, it looks good to me, but the problems that happen later would have been fixed if I used a proper unit test. So I'll probably be adding unit tests for white blacklists later. I won't record that because I don't think it will be exciting to watch. So the main changes have been committed and pushed. Thanks for watching.